Hi guys, today we are going to talk about a very interesting case. When you have a React application and you suddenly realize that it's not fast enough, what are ways there to make it faster? How can you optimize it? I've prepared an example here. It is intentionally exaggerated. There are 200 rows and every row is editable. You have a name, phone, email, city, street, so that gives us 500 text edits on this page. If you try to type something here, you probably hear the sound of me typing and you see how it lags just a little bit behind. And if I type too fast, it doesn't even update for the very long period of time, and only after that we can see the result here. So why is this happening? Let's first have a look at the code itself. This is the code how I wrote it. We have a data here in the data file. If you open it, we can see that it's just a very long list, exactly 200 rows of employees. And here, what we do, we just render a table here. And then for every employee, we render an employee here. We pass the onChange function that will find an employee index, change that index with the new data, and then set the employees. And employee here is just a table row, every column of which has an input, and this input takes a value and it takes a function onChange. When the value changes, it will take the initial employee, put here the new value, and then call this onChange function that comes from the parents component. So I think the code is quite straightforward. So again, we have a table. Every row is a separate component. In this components, we have just rendering method that renders 5 inputs, and every input call the onChange function when it changes. Alright, let's now talk about the performance optimizations. The first rule every professional will tell you is to not optimize until there is a real clear problem. It's called premature optimization, and it's called this way because when you optimize your code before there is a problem, you actually clutter your code with all these little tricks and you make it non-readable, and you can introduce bugs or you can introduce other performance problems with it. So please don't optimize upfront, don't make your life harder. Now, having said that, we clearly have a problem here, and I put a console log statement right here in the render function just to have an understanding of what's going on here. If we open the console log and type something here, you can see that this render method appears here exactly 200 times, which means that every time we change a phone here, just a single field in the object, it will update all the rows here. Another way to see the same thing is if we open this React tab here, which comes from the official extension for Chrome from the React team. And here are settings, and there's a checkbox called highlight updates. I have it turned on, but it's off by default, so you should turn it on. And then when you type something here, it will actually highlight all the parts of the application that are being redrawn. And this is extremely handy. In this case, if we type here something, you can see how the whole application is being redrawn when only one row actually has its data updated. So how do we prevent it from doing that? Well, let's have a look at the code one more time. So the first thing we can do here is we can wrap our components into a React.memo. React.memo is a special function which is similar to pure components, and it transforms your components in a way that when React runs through the rendering tree and it sees that the arguments here didn't change, it will just take a result from the cache and it will not actually run your render function. So this sounds like something that we want, so let's do this. I will just call a new component here, and I will call this one employee FN. The important thing to note here is that when React will compare your arguments, it will compare them shallowly. We'll talk about this later, but now just note this because this is extremely important concept. So let's just see if it helped something. We'll just open the console log again, type something here, and as you can see, it still rendered it 200 times, so nothing changed here, and the speed is still very slow. So it didn't help. So the key to understand this is to understand this shallowly rendering mechanics. In this case, when React tries to decide whether it should run this function or not, it will compare the arguments with the previous arguments shallowly, which means that if we have two objects and they semantically might be the same, if they hold the references to different objects, it will decide that they are not the same. Let me show you what I mean. So if you have two objects, A and B, which look the same, and you ask React, are they the same? It will give you false. The reason is they are two different objects. They live in different space in memory, so they are not the same. And if you say A equal B, now both references hold a reference to the same object. And if you ask, are they equal? It will give us true. So this is what's happening here with this onChange function. OnChange function, every function in JavaScript is just an object. So they are defined by the same rules, you just can call them. So here we create this onChange function every time, and when it compares it with a previous state, it realizes that those are different objects, and so it still goes here and calls this render function. So we don't want that. Let's first remove this from the cycle. Just say this is a function onChange, which looks like this. That alone won't help us because every time it re-renders the app components, it will still create this new function. So we should cache it somehow. There's a function for that, special function called useCallback. And it takes a function it needs to cache as a first argument, and it takes dependencies as a second argument. In which case here we don't want any dependencies, but as you can see, it applies automatically employees dependency here because I have an ESLint rule for this, and I have automatically fixing on save. So let's have a closer look. When I remove this, you first can see that it shows me a warning. If you have a closer look, it says React's useCallback has a missing dependencies employees. You should include this into the dependency array. And when I save, it will run ESLint fix and automatically insert the employees into the array. Now this is not what we want here. So in order to fix this, we will use a different form of setEmployees function here. As you probably know, it can also accept a function which takes a previous state and should return a new state. So we just put everything here, and this will be brief, and here, and here, and it should just return the new state here. Now, as you can see, it gives us an opposite warning. It says that useCallback has unnecessary dependency employees. Okay, I agree with that, so just remove it. Okay, so what's happening here once again? We use a useCallback function in order to cache this function. So every time this component renders, it will try to understand if there are any dependencies that were changed, and they are known. So it will just basically cache that function and return us the very same function that hold a reference to the very same objects in the memory. And so in this case, this function will always be the same. So let's see if it helped us. Let's try to type something here. As you can see, there are no normal lags, and every time we type something, this render function runs only once on every typing. And if we open the React tab here, you can see it only highlights the one row that it actually changed. Okay, so I think that's it. I hope it wasn't too intense. I know it's a hard topic. I'm still kind of in the process of digesting this myself. But if you have any question, just write me and I will answer you, and maybe we'll make more videos like this in the future. But for now, just thanks for watching and see you next week.